Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife.
Hello, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic. There on the screen you can see today's crossword from the Times. Quite an interesting puzzle today. I don't know if how many of you are members of the Times Crossword Club and keep track of the times recorded by some of the best solvers, but if you do, I mean, a lot of the top times you can instantly dismiss, by the way, because they're not real, but you should always look out for people like Jason James and Verlaine, and today you'll have seen them recording times of sort of 3 minutes 30 seconds, 4 minutes on this puzzle, and you may, if you're not a speed demon, be thinking, how on earth does anyone solve a puzzle, any Times crossword, let alone this Times crossword, so quickly? Well, the interesting thing I think about this puzzle is it does contain quite a lot of what I'll call crosswordese. So bits of vocabulary that if you're a regular solver of the Times crossword, they sort of form part of your lexicon, and they give you a massive, massive head start into any number of these clues. So I thought what we do today is I'm going to go through the clues. I'm not going to solve all of them by any means, but what I'm going to do is try and pick out what I think of as crosswordese in each clue to the extent it exists, and maybe that'll give you an idea of how these people are solving the clues almost instantly in a lot of cases. Let's start with one across. So one tearing into extremely fruity trifles. Well, the bit of crosswordese there is the word extremely. So extremely fruity, instantly, I'm thinking it's the outside, it's the extreme letters of the word fruity. And we've got one tearing into, so it sounds like we've got to put something into those letters, and you know, if you have this as a head start, you may not get this instantly from this construction, but it's a massive help, and it would instantly give you a help on 5 down. So turn up with husband intent supplying healthy food. There isn't too much crosswordese in there. I mean, husband is very often H, we could say that, but the fact you've got something that needs to be put in a tent, so you're probably looking for a short synonym for a tent, perhaps beginning with a Y. All of a sudden that clue becomes quite a lot easier. Now let's carry on stepping through them in order. Work with men at Old Port. Well, this is an example where I don't think, probably the only example in the puzzle where a bit of crossword experience wouldn't help you. The way I read this clue when I first read it was we needed one of the abbreviations for work, which is normally OP, for opus. With men, well, men in a military sense can be any number of about 10 short abbreviations, you know, OR, RA, RN, and several other things. So I sort of didn't think too hard about that, and then at old, well, that made me think perhaps it was ending in O, and indeed if you actually solved the checking answer here, you would find, you know, this construction looks correct, so it's very natural to put a P here and hope. Well, in fact, here, this is actually a word that means work, and what you needed to do is to put men, OR, at is plain, O, old, and the very common Port of Rio there for oratorio. So that was perhaps a counter-example to what I'm saying. There wasn't too much crosswordese in this one. I like the clue, but it's obviously a homophone. You need to come up with a word for downloads, and something that sounds like that. Swaggering adventurer, sister about to clean clasp. Again, nothing too much in there. Here we go. Agent crossing railway line nimbly. Well, here, when you see the words railway, you should always be thinking of RY. Very occasionally, you'll also see L for a railway, because I think one of the US, I think it's in Chicago, you can travel on the L. 14, reformed persons. The word reformed is instantly should be screaming anagram. And then finally make, well again you're probably looking at the last letter of the word make there to give you the 8 letters you need. Inferior in some quarters in sparse city. Well, sparse city again, you know, Bath is a very useful short word. So if you see sparse city, next time think Bath. This was, I thought, perhaps the hardest clue of the puzzle. Words may be associated with some fine gauzy fabric. What you actually needed to do here was think of words in the term of if you have words with somebody, you argue with them. So you needed a short synonym for that, followed by a short synonym for the word some. If you do that correctly, you can come up with a 7-letter word, which is a fine gauzy fabric. But that certainly I didn't think was easy, and I don't think crossword experience would particularly help you with that clue. Sloth unknown in east, captured by young woman. 2 bits of crossword ease help you here. If you see the word unknown, you should be thinking of X, Y or Z. It's almost always one of them. And then young woman, always be thinking of either gal, G-A-L, or lass. So you need to put one of those around the outside of an unknown, and then in E is IN, and then E for east. Here we got to see an old lady sheltering a convict. Again, instantly, old lady, you should be thinking of mother, ma, dam. Sheltering a convict, well, that's either going to be a lag or a con. And you know, given the options there, that is a clue that probably would take an experienced solver 1 second, I think. Literally as quickly as you could read the clue, you would have the answer, which gives you an idea of how much of an advantage. If you came to that clue cold, you know, you could be there for quite some time. Our new envoy, the word foolishly there, is screaming anagram. Crossing a king, well, king is always going to be R or K. So again, pretty easy. Make an impression, and so on with head of history. Well, you know, and so on there. I think we can always think of an abbreviation for that, and you've basically got the answer. Old archdeacon. Well, something you do come across from time to time is that there is an abbreviation for an archdeacon, believe it or not, which is ven, for venerable. So again, if you know that, that's extremely helpful for solving this clue. Supervised. Old archdeacon, well, O is very often old, and you're probably thinking, archdeacon, I need to start putting in my ven here. Supervised, well, if you have this as a start, it's very easy to get the answer. Bovid mammal bound to be tied to stake. Again, I think that's susceptible to crossword ease in the sense that many of us will look at the word bound and instantly think lope, and stake instantly think anti. And if you only have to reverse them, put them in the other order, and there you have the answer. Let's carry on. So, provide new community for theatre the Spanish writer set up. Well, I think the key here is the word theatre. Theatre is very often abbreviated to rep, for repertory, I think. There's a repertory theatre. So if you see theatre, think rep. The Spanish, if you see the Spanish, you should be thinking of the word el. And writer, well, writer's a bit more difficult because it could be pen, but very often, for some reason, it seems to be Poe. Edgar Allan Poe makes a lot of appearances in crosswords because his letters are so useful. So if you have to use the words Poe and L somehow to complete this this answer, it doesn't take too long to come up with re-people, which is a reversal of L and Poe at the end of the rep. And there you go, probably one of the harder words in terms of, I doubt many of us would use the word re-people very often, but actually to an experienced solver, that's almost a gimme. Protestant, before initially singing some bits, rushed to invite one in. Well, I don't think there was that much crossword ease in here, but I will draw your attention to some bits in the middle of that clue. I really liked that. Some bits here is defining the word bite, B-Y-T-E, which is lovely. I don't know that I think I have seen something like that before, but I thought it was very elegant. 4 down again, unusually apt clue. Instantly, you should be thinking of an anagram of apt and clue. Covering Yankee. We'll always be on the lookout for words used in the international radio alphabet, whatever it's officially called, because if they're used, that's probably the letter you need. So here you need an anagram of apt, clue, a bubble, or around a Y. And the only thing that's slightly surprising, I think, about this clue is eucalypt, whether I think many of us would think of eucalyptus or even eucalypti, but eucalypt, well, that is the answer here. Okay, well, a graduate at Sorbonne who at first supported French underground. This was a nice clue, but again, I think susceptible to experience, because an experienced solver will read this clue rather more carefully than I just did when I read it out. Graduate, very often that's MA or BA. At Sorbonne, who is making a solver, or experienced solver at least, think of the French word for who. So that's something to be on the lookout for. If you see random mentions of French places or Spanish places, followed by a common word, always be thinking of the translation of the word. So here, once you get the reading of the clue correctly, you've got almost all of the answer. At first supported S, i.e. the first letter, and then the whole thing defines the French underground. This was just a simple hidden. I don't think that's going to hold too many people up. Again, drunkard, immediately be thinking of the word sot, S-O-T. It's such a useful short synonym. And there we see unknown again. Now, we've already seen unknown once. I think in the other clue it was used to define a Z. Here it's used to define a Y. It's always going to be X, Y, or Z. Be perfectly aware what short of water do we hear. Well, again, the help here for the experienced solver is the words do we hear. We're instantly then thinking it's a homophone, so we know that the answer, or you need to find an expression that means what's short of water, and we're going to have to, that's going to sound like the answer, which is be perfectly aware. Uproar when brown bear traps leaders of large youth hostel. Well, maybe this was perhaps one of the clues where a bit of experience might have actually slowed you down very slightly. I say that because I read this clue, I thought uproar when brown was how I started it. I immediately was thinking it's an 8-letter word for uproar, and I immediately thought the answer was therefore brouhaha, especially as I know that BR is an abbreviation for brown. So I did have to spend a few seconds more thinking about how I would get the ooh-ha-ha here. Couldn't get it and had to think again. So it's not too difficult, this one, because the expression leaders of large youth hostel should be making you think I need to use somehow the letters L, Y and H in the answer. And if you've got L, Y and H in the middle of this construction, it shouldn't take too long to come up with a word that means uproar. Again here, this writer's books. Well, this writer, apostrophe S, could define I'm. And this is a very common device used by setters to indicate the letters I and M. Books, always be thinking of the books of the Bible. Normally it'll be either OT for Old Testament or NT for New Testament. Sometimes you might see AV for authorized version, as in the whole of the Bible rather than just part of it. Sometimes, well, no, it's books. I think those are the three you should remember. Let's have a look. carry on. Curious thing about soft drink, again, the word about. If you see the word about and you can't see how it's suggesting that one bit of wordplay surrounds or encircles something else, then consider whether about could be cluing circa, because circa can be abbreviated to C or CA. So here I think the compiler needed CA in the wordplay, so he's used about. Time a girl embraces popular. Here the word popular, always be thinking of in, it's so useful. If you see time, consider T. The thing about time is it's a bit awkward because there are lots of short synonyms for units of time, like sec or HR for hour, or day, or that sort of thing. So it doesn't necessarily need to be T, or even era or eon, I guess, but here it is T. I'll give you that clue. English night, again, whenever you see chess pieces, always be thinking of how that chess piece would be represented in chess notation. So if a knight makes a move, it would always be N, N2 to whatever it is. So always think of N for knight. And then that's all that you need to know for that one. And then ancient city, you're almost always either looking at the city of Ur, or the city of Ek, EC. Again, very, very susceptible to a bit of experience. So I don't know, we've gone through all the clues there. I don't know what proportion of them were susceptible to experience, but it was a lot. And that is why some of the very best solvers did this puzzle in 3 minutes. Anyway, I hope that was a useful run through, something a bit different today, and we'll see you again next time on Cracking the Cryptic.
Bare necessities are Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life.